What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we're reviewing Star Trek. This one came out in 2009 and was directed by J.J. Abrams and stars Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto. Now, before we start, visit the like button, subscribe, post notification bell for every video, and let's just start. Let's start talking about the good. So, all the actors and actresses in this film are all fantastic. I really enjoyed every single performance and every character in this film. The opening sequence I thought was great, especially an alien ship taking the USS Enterprise. Captain Robau. This takes place before the events of this film. Captain Robau, played by Faran Tahir, is taken hostage by Nero, who is played by Eric Bana. Nero then stabs and kills Captain Robau, and George, played by Chris Hemsworth, who is James Kirk's father, sacrifices himself. And James Kirk is played by Chris Pine, and George Kirk sacrifices himself in that last part of the opening sequence, and it is fantastic. So I thought the opening sequence was great. The cinematography, which includes shots of cameras, the lighting, I thought it was all fantastic. J.J. Abrams directs this film very, very well. You could see all the action, very, very visually appealing, and I really enjoyed every single frame of this film. The first act of the film I thought was great. It was the characters well. I cared about each of the characters in this film. And the villains, I actually quite like the villains, which I'll get to later. There's a sequence where it shows the backstory of Spock. It was great. Spock is played by Zachary Quinto, and he is fantastic. He used to get bullied because he had a human mother, and his father was Vulcan, and the Vulcans think that humans are low and below them. And I thought that really made Spock's character more emotionally driven, which I really enjoyed that aspect of that character. There's also a great bar fight scene where Jim fights Nyota Uhura's guards, and Nyota Uhura is played by Zoe Saldana, who is fantastic in this film. There's also a great transport scene where Jim meets Leonard McCoy, played by Karl Urban, and Karl Urban is great. He is a very, very great actor, and he fits perfectly into this film. There's also a hilarious Enterprise simulation scene where Jim is starting to make it a joke, and I really enjoyed how J.J. Abrams put the humor in this film, because Jim is a very, very funny character. Chris Pine is hilarious in this film. The center of the film I thought was very entertaining. I really enjoyed all the dynamics between the characters in this film, especially in that second act. There's also a great friendship between Jim and Leonard. They have a very, very well done friendship, and I really enjoyed that aspect of this film. There's also a great scene where the USS Enterprise is intercepted by Nero. Now, Nero does intercept the USS Enterprise and takes over the ship and the crew, and I thought it was a very tense sequence. There's also another great scene where Nero captures Captain Pike, and Captain Pike is played by Bruce Greenwood. Bruce Greenwood is fantastic as Captain Pike. He is very, very good. Nero, I thought was a good villain. I thought he was a good villain. Not the best in the franchise, but he was good enough, and I actually enjoyed his performance. There's also another great scene where Jim and Hikaru Sulu, played by John Cho, land on an alien ship and their parachutes break, but they both eventually make it back on the ship because Jim is the main character. But I thought that sequence was very, very fun. It was very entertaining, and it was fast-paced, and I thought it worked well to have that sort of leisurely, fun action sequence in the film. There's also another emotional sequence where Spock's mother dies before almost making it onto the ship, and you see Spock's... Spock is not really known to show emotion, but it is very emotional for him at this time. There's another great scene where Jim meets Spock from the future, played by Leonard Nimoy, and he is fantastic. The original Spock from the original Star Trek. He is in this film, and he is fantastic. There's also a great first meeting with Montgomery, played by Simon Pegg, who is great in this trilogy, and Jim and Spock, and the future Spock. Very, very well done. Very, very well done first meeting. There's also another good conversation between Spock and his father about why Spock's father, or Sarek, played by Ben Cross, married Spock's mother, played by Winona Ryder. It was because he loved her, and I thought that sequence was very, very emotional and fit his character very well. The third act of the film I thought was fantastic. It is one of the best and most emotionally satisfying third acts of any action film in the past 2 decades. I really, really loved the third act of this film. Spock and Jim are the only ones who exit the ship and work together in the third act, and well, for most of the third act, that's what they're doing, and I thought it worked very well. There's also another sequence where it's an awesome entrance of the Enterprise, and it saves Spock in the third act. One of the best sequences in this film with the Star Trek theme. The Star Trek theme from Michael Giacchino shows up, and it is fantastic. There's also another great scene where Nero tells Kirk that he would rather die than get help from the Enterprise, and Kirk gives him his wish, and Enterprise shoots down Nero's ship, and that's in the third act as well. And I thought it worked as a conclusion for those two characters and their rivalry. There's also another great scene where Spock meets future Spock and has a conversation with him and does the Vulcan Spock sign. Great sequence, great callback to the original Star Trek, and I thought it worked very well for those two characters. There's also another great scene where Kirk becomes captain of the Enterprise, and that is the scene where you finally now see Captain Kirk of the Enterprise. The score by Michael Giacchino is great. The Star Trek theme is phenomenal. One of the best themes for any film that I've ever heard. I really, really love the Star Trek theme, especially for these three films. The ending sequence I thought was great. The Enterprise goes into warp speed, and Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, narrates that entire ending sequence, and I thought it worked very well, and it concludes the film very well. That's all the good I have. Now let's move on to the bad. So there's no bad with this film. Star Trek is one of the best reboots of all time. It's one of my favorite films, and I highly recommend it. And I'm going to give Star Trek an A. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like button, subscribe, and post notification bell so you know for the video. I'm Peter. Thank you for watching.